Okay, welcome everyone to session number 302 of Kevin Reed's A Course in Miracles. Today we are following up with the pamphlet, all right, Psychotherapy, Purpose, Process, and Practice. Okay, we are in the second chapter of that, which is called The Process of Psychotherapy, and we are in the third section of the second chapter, which is the role of the psychotherapist. Okay. So, let's just dive right in. The role of the psychotherapist. The psychotherapist is a leader in the sense that he walks slightly ahead of the patient and helps him to avoid a few of the pitfalls along the road by seeing them first. Ideally, he is also a follower. For one should, with capital O, for one should walk ahead of him, to give him light to see. Without this one, both will merely stumble blindly on to nowhere. It is, however, impossible that this one be wholly absent if the goal is healing. He may, however, not be recognized. And so the little light that can be accepted is all there is to light the way to truth. Okay. So the psychotherapist is a leader. See, that's diminishing the idea of separation of interests. It's reminding me of that saying that's attributed to Ram Dass that says we're all just walking each other home. And in a sense, that's what he's saying here. The psychotherapist is a leader, right, in the sense that he's walking slightly ahead of the patient, right, because he knows the road, right, he knows what the pitfalls are, right, and he can be a guide, and it helps him to avoid a few of the pitfalls along the road. Right. Ideally, right, the therapist is a follower, right, and now it's a little pun. Right? He's a leader, and yet, ideally, he's a follower. Right? What he's talking about here is an inner teacher. He's following an inner teacher. Okay? For one, and he uses a capital O, the one is capitalized. Right? He's also a follower, for one should walk ahead of him to give him light to see. And without this one, both merely stumble blindly onto nowhere. What he's talking about here is that inner teacher. Right? In the Course in Miracles, we call it the Holy Spirit. We call it Jesus. Right? And like he says, you don't have to believe in anything. Right? But you're listening to your higher self, you might call it. Right? Or you might have an image of love in your mind, right, that blossoms when you're in session. Right. But the psychotherapist ideally has an inner teacher. Otherwise, both patient and therapist stumble blindly onto nowhere. Right. But he says, but because the two came together, one came to say, I have a problem, can you help me? And the other said, yes, I will help you. All right, there was that joining, that willingness to help. All right. So he says, and even in that, there's something comes through, even though it might not be recognized. Right? Neither one may realize they're they're trying to access a higher truth. Right? They're appealing to something higher. Right? Without this one, both will merely stumble. It is, however, impossible that this one be wholly absent if the goal is healing. So, however you want to picture the right mind, the memory of who you are, the atonement, anything you want to put it, Jesus, Holy Spirit, all right? Any image of love in your mind, all right? He says it won't be wholly absent, all right? As long as the goal is healing. Okay? He may, however, not be recognized. And so the little light that can be accepted is all there is to light the way to truth. All right? He says some light gets through, as Leonard Cohen would say. There's a crack in everything. That's how the light gets in. And the crack, perhaps in the patient's situation, would be noticing I have a problem of some sort. Can you help me? All right. Yes, I will help you. There's the crack, and the light will come in, whether the therapist or the patient has an idea of a higher self. He said that's enough to let a little bit of the light in. All right. And that it will grow eventually. Because in paragraph 2, he says, healing is limited by the limitations of the psychotherapist, as it is limited by those of the patient. The aim of the process, therefore, is to transcend these limits. Neither can do this alone, but when they join, the potentiality for transcending all limitations has been given them. Now, the extent of their success depends on how much of this potentiality they are willing to use. The willingness may come from either one at the beginning, and as the other shares it, it will grow. Progress becomes a matter of decision. It can reach almost to heaven, or go no further than a step or two from hell. All right? The decision is yours and mine. All right? And he says healing is limited by the limitations of the therapist and the patient. All right? If the therapist thinks that he or she is the healer, they're doing something wonderful for this patient, all right, then their ego is in the way. All right? The ego is limiting the potentiality, as he says here. It's limiting what could be done. All right? So the idea is to the therapist to ask for help with his or her own ego. And then the love or the wisdom will just come right through them. All right? And the healing will be stronger and more rapid. All right? Despite what the form looks like. Okay? Because remember, healing is taking place in the mind. All right? The aim of the process is to transcend these limits. We're transcending the limits of the ego, the idea of separate interests. You know, like I said, if the therapist thinks that he's or she is the answer to this guy's problems or this woman's problems, you know, they have to rise above the limits of their own ego. And to realize that we're all the same. We have the same problem, right? Because all the problems come from the belief I separated from the oneness, the belief that I separated from God. Right? And all the resistance comes from that thought also. The resistance comes from the thought that I am a part of God. I am spirit. Right? That can be very frightening. What? I'm going to disappear? What about my friends? If you have friends. All right, so you have to rise, the aim is to rise above these limitations. And neither can do this alone. Right? But when they join, the potentiality for transcending all limitations has been given them. When they join together, and at least one of them has the idea that there are no separate interests here, all right? You know, this is my job and you're going to pay me, you know, or whatever. You know, instead of noticing there's a person that is in some degree of angst or anxiousness or has some problem, and we are going to figure it out, all right? And we are going to call on a higher self to help us out. All right? Now, the extent of their success depends on how much of this potential they are willing to use. All right? How much of the potential of the right mind are they willing to use? The willingness may come from either one at the beginning, and as the other shares it, it will grow. Progress becomes a matter of decision. It can reach almost to heaven, or go no further than a step or two from hell. All right? It's always our decision. What is it? Do I want to step back and let the one lead us down the path? All right. He says, and it will take you as far as you want to go. All right. But I'm thinking of even Helen Schuckman, the scribe of the Course. At one point she said, no more. There was supposed to be more pamphlets, and she just said no more. So she went as far as she could go. All right. And Jesus was grateful. He said, thank you. All right. So, paragraph 3. It is quite possible for psychotherapy to seem to fail. It is even possible for the result to look like retrogression. But in the end, there must be some success. One asks for help, another hears and tries to answer in the form of help. This is the formula for salvation, and must heal. Divided goals alone can interfere with perfect healing. One wholly egoless therapist could heal the world without a word, merely by being there. No one needs to see him or talk to him or even know of his existence. His simple presence is enough to heal. All right? So, when he talks about the egoless therapist, it's somebody who's transcended their ego. You know, we take Jesus as our prime example. Jesus had transcended the ego. All right? And his presence healed. It healed the split mind. whether we realize it or not. Right? Our minds have been healed. We're just living in the echoes, the aftermath of the thought of separation. Right? And like he says in one part of the text, this world was over long ago. The moment it was conceived of, it was over. But we're living in that belief. It's like he says, you're at home in heaven, right? Dreaming of exile. Right? And it's a pretty convincing dream, don't you think? And the idea is to become a lucid dreamer, to start to realize it's a dream. All right? There's let me see if I can pull it up. It's a wonderful little saying from the Course. It says, you will first dream of peace. This is the process. And this is the process that psychotherapy can help us with. Right? It can lead us to the path, right? To where we start to dream of peace. In other words, within the dream, we start seeing the reflection of peace. We have peace of mind. It says, you will dream first of peace, and then awaken to it. Your first exchange of what you made for what you want is the exchange of nightmares for the happy dreams of love. And that's basically what's happening in psychotherapy. I'm trying to exchange my nightmares. All right? I could be literally having nightmares. And so I go to maybe go to a Freudian therapist or any kind of therapist. I say, can you help me? Right? That's the knock on the door. That's the invitation to the Holy Spirit. Can you help me? And the therapist goes, yes, I can help you. Even if he or she is unaware of a higher self. Right? It's their willingness to render aid, to help. Right? That is the crack that lets the light in. All right? And he says it's possible that psychotherapy seems to fail. Right? It might even look like you're regressing. Right? But in the end, there must be some success. Because for a moment, no matter how, even if you were in therapy for a year, then you quit. It was a moment. In that moment, you let the light in. You invited the light in. All right? This is one asks for help, another hears it, and tries to answer in the form of help. This is the formula for salvation, and must heal. You can push pause on the healing, right? It might look like you're regressing, but the mind has been opened, all right? The healing has come in. It's just up to us to recognize it, to accept it, okay? This is what can interfere with the healing is divided goals. Right? Can interfere with perfect healing. And it could be anything. A therapist might think, this is the way to do it, and you think, no, screw that, I'm not doing that. Or that's not what I came here for. Right? All kinds of things. If you're not in agreement, and there are divided goals. Right? But he says one totally egoless therapist could heal the world. And that's Jesus. All right? There are many people throughout history who were egoless. All right? we don't know about them, or I don't. All right? I don't know about you. I mean, I've heard of, and I've encountered in writings people that seem to have transcended ego to some degree, or to a very high degree, But I guess our example in the Western world is Jesus. He would be totally egoless. And he has healed the world. It's just that we don't know it yet. We haven't awakened from this dream. And that's why we keep practicing coming back to our higher self. Right? And therapy might be a part of that process for us. All right? I mean, personally, I went through therapy, for a couple of years. Right? It was a big help. All right? I've been, roaming around off the rails for a while, and it was a big help. But let's see. Only one wholly egoless therapist could heal the world without a word, merely by being there. It's because it's not about form, it's about the mind. And if this totally egoless person is here, everybody's healed, because there's only one mind. No one needs see him or talk to him or even know of his existence. His simple presence is enough to heal. All right? The ideal therapist is one with Christ. But healing is a process, not a fact. All right? Healing is a process. The therapist cannot progress without the patient. And the patient cannot be ready to receive the Christ, or he could not be sick. In a sense, the egoless therapist is an abstraction that stands at the end of the process of healing. Too advanced to believe in sickness, and too near to God to keep his feet on earth. Now he can help through those in need of help. For thus he carries out the plan established for salvation. The psychotherapist becomes his patient, working through other patients to express his thoughts as he receives them from the mind of Christ. All right? So when he says the plan, all right, there's no actual plan. The plan, if there was a plan, would just be undoing what we chose. We chose to believe we were separate. So now we're going to undo that choice. And that's the process of therapy. It's a process, not a fact. All right? It's an ongoing process in the mind. And you'll notice in your own practice, if you're practicing the tenets of the Course, that we fluctuate. That's my experience. I fluctuate. We go back and forth. One moment you feel connected to the oneness, you feel connected to the Holy Spirit, you feel connected to Jesus. Next moment, you're angry or you're afraid. And it's in those moments when you can realize, oh, I must have strayed. All right? I must have strayed. All right? There's plenty of things in the text, like Jesus said, you dropped my hand, things like that. All right? And he says, imagine yourself holding my hand. And he says, and I assure you, this will be no idle fantasy. Right? One of my favorite lines in the course. All right? So this is a joint venture, as the text also says, the ark of peace, like Noah's ark. The ark of peace is entered 2 by 2. All right? We do it in conjunction with an other. All right? There's some kind of a relationship there. All right? Because there's the opportunity for forgiveness, the opportunity to realize what guide I'm listening to. All right? And the main thing is the opportunity for forgiveness, which means it's the opportunity to have my misperceptions corrected. All right? To rise above my limitations. All right? So it is a process. All right? And you will fluctuate. The thing is, how quickly do I realize I've made the detour into fear, as he says, and then ask to come back, help me come back. All right. The therapist cannot progress without the patient. All right. And we're talking about progressing to the awakening from the dream. The awareness of one's own innocence, the awareness of the oneness, no separation. All right? And the patient cannot be ready to receive the Christ. All right? You have to be ready, or you wouldn't be there. All right? If you weren't ready to receive the Christ, you wouldn't be sick. So they're on the journey together. Okay. And he says, look, in a sense, well, let me just make a thing on the sickness. The patient wouldn't be there if he wasn't sick. And by that, Jesus means he's where the patient is reluctant or refuses to accept the Christ in himself, to accept his own innocence. All right. So therapist and patient help each other to do that. And in a sense, the egoless psychotherapist is an abstraction that stands at the end of the process of healing. So when the process of healing is over, when the split mind has been integrated, when the innocence is accepted and it's reflected all around, right? That's the egoless therapist, right? It's an abstraction that stands at the end of the process. So the egoless therapist is too advanced. He's an advanced teacher of God, as the text would say. He's too advanced to believe in sickness. In other words, he's not going to reinforce your idea of sickness or anyone's idea of sickness. But he's not going to tell you, look, arise and walk. He's not going to tell you, get up out of that bed. He's not going to tell you, just stop having those nightmares. That's not it. Right? He doesn't believe in the separation. That's the idea. That's the sickness. All right? He's too advanced to believe in separation. Because I believe in separation, I'm having nightmares. I go to the therapist. All right? He's too advanced to believe in sickness and too near to God to keep his feet on the earth. This is almost gone. Almost gone. Now he can help through those in need of help. Thus he carries out the plan established for salvation. The psychotherapist becomes his patient, working through other patients to express his thoughts as he receives them from the mind of Christ. Right. So they're undoing, the plan is undoing what we have chosen to believe in separation. Right. And the psychotherapist becomes the patient, and he works because there's only one mind. All right. All those thoughts that are received from the mind of Christ, all right, are entering the one mind, all right, assisted by the egoless therapist. All right. The idea is for the therapist to connect with the inner teacher. Become aware of your own ego and ask for help with it. Put it aside. All right. And I was just thinking of what just came up for me. I just had a conversation with my niece, who was telling me about an incident she had with her 3-year-old daughter. A 3-year-old daughter. She said she told her daughter was being taken by her father to Jess's mom's house because they were going to babysit. But Jess wasn't going in the car. And she said to her daughter, she goes, I love you. And the little 3-year-old girl turned around and said, I don't love you. And at that moment, she was so hurt, and she noticed how angry she was, right? And she just let her husband take the baby out to the car. She didn't go out to the car, but she quickly noticed that this was her ego reaction. She goes, what am I doing? Right? I'm 30-something years old, and I'm angry at a 3-year-old baby. She goes, that's ridiculous. And she put the ego aside and chose, she said, what can I do for this little baby? And she was guided. She went out to the car, and she just looked in the window, and the child was still angry. I think she was angry because Mommy wasn't going with her. And she just said, okay, I love you. Have a good time, and I'll see you later. And they drove off. All right. But that was putting the ego aside. I'm going to put my ego aside. My ego says, what? She said, I don't love you after all I've done for this kid. I brought her into the world, kept her alive so far for 3 years, and taken care of all the problems that she might have, and this and that. And I'm not worthy of love. And all. The ego will batter you with reasons why you should be resentful, or you should be angry. But she made a choice. All right? And that's the idea. You notice your ego, you make the choice, and you come to the right mind and you just ask, help me to see correctly. And of course, it can happen a lot quicker than my explanation, but that's what happens. And that's what a good therapist or a therapist, it would behoove them to do that. Let's put it that way. Just put your ego aside, right, and let the light come through. Right? Bring the darkness to the light of the truth. Right? And just request the light, request the truth, right? And the psychotherapist becomes the patient, because at one point there'll be no separation, right? And the psychotherapist will be working through his patients or her patients, expressing the thoughts as they receive them from the mind of Christ. You just tap into the truth. you request it, and let it be. Let it come through you. Right? Make me an instrument of your peace. Thank you. And next week we'll go into a little longer session called the process of illness. Okay? Okay. Thank you for helping me. Thank you for being here. And I'll see you in the next session.